The new professor's first day, Professor Sarah Chen, stood outside classroom 7 Alpha at the Kepler Station Academy. Checking her watch one more time, she was exactly 3 minutes early, which was perfect. First impressions mattered, especially when you were the first human to ever teach at a galactic institution. She smoothed down her navy blue jacket and picked up her breakfast container. There hadn't been time to eat at her quarters, and the transport from Earth sector had taken longer than expected. The classroom door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing one of the most diverse groups of students she had ever seen. 12 young aliens looked up at her with curiosity, fear, and excitement, all mixed together. Sarah had studied each species extensively during her preparation, but seeing them in person was still breathtaking. 3 Victari students sat in the front row, their crystalline bodies catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. They communicated through color changes in their transparent skin, and right now they were displaying a soft blue that meant polite attention. Behind them 4 Zephyrians towered even while seated. Their silver skin gleamed and their large dark eyes tracked her every movement. They were known throughout the galaxy for their perfect memory and analytical minds. 2 Kalani students had claimed seats near the window, their furry bodies barely visible above the desk surfaces. Their large ears twitched constantly, picking up sounds that no other species could hear. At the back of the room, 3 Thraxian students clicked their mandibles softly as they watched her. Their insect-like faces showed no emotion that Sarah could read, but their compound eyes missed nothing. Sarah walked to the front of the classroom and set her breakfast container on the desk. The mixed aromas of scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee immediately filled the air. She noticed several students' reactions to the smell, their various forms of noses, sensors, and breathing apparatus all responding to the unfamiliar scents. She opened her thermos and poured steaming coffee into her cup. The rich brown liquid caught everyone's attention immediately. One of the Victari students shifted from blue to yellow, which Sarah remembered meant curiosity or interest. She took a sip of the hot coffee and smiled at her students. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the classroom's translation system. "I'm Professor Chen, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you today. This is going to be a wonderful journey for all of us as we explore comparative biology together." She opened her breakfast container and picked up her fork. The scrambled eggs were still warm and fluffy, just the way she liked them. As she took her first bite, she noticed that every single student in the room had stopped moving. The gentle clicking from the Thraxian ceased. The Kalani's ears stood perfectly still. Even the color patterns on the Victari students froze in place. Sarah paused with her fork halfway to her mouth for the second bite. "Is everything all right?" she asked, looking around the room. One of the Zephyrians, a tall female with particularly bright silver skin, raised her long arm. When she spoke, her voice was musical but concerned. "Professor Chin, we are observing you consume what appears to be processed biological matter. Is this a normal behavior for your species?" Sarah looked down at her eggs, then back at her students. She realized they had probably never seen a human eat before. Their own eating habits were likely very different from hers. "Yes, this is completely normal," she said with a smile. "Humans eat food several times each day. These are called eggs, and they come from birds on my home planet." The reaction was immediate and intense. The Victari students flashed through several colors rapidly, settling on orange, which Sarah was pretty sure meant alarm. The Thraxians began clicking so fast it sounded like machinery. The Kalani's ears were now standing straight up, and their small voices could be heard chattering to each other in their native language. One of the Thraxian students, whose black and green carapace gleamed under the lights, managed to slow. He was clicking enough for the translator to work. "Professor Chen, you are telling us that you consume the reproductive output of other species, the unborn offspring of flying creatures?" Sarah stopped chewing. When he put it that way, her breakfast did sound rather disturbing. She swallowed carefully and tried to explain. "Well, yes, but the eggs we eat aren't fertilized. They wouldn't have become baby birds. They're just ... food. This explanation seemed to make things worse. All three Vectari students turned bright. Red, which definitely meant distress. Sarah decided to continue with her meal and hoped they would adjust. She set down the empty egg container and picked up her bacon. The 4 strips of meat were perfectly crispy and smelled wonderful. As she bit into the first piece of bacon, the classroom erupted in various forms of alien communication. The Thraxians' clicking became so rapid it was almost a buzz. The Zephyrians leaned forward in their seats, their dark eyes wide with fascination and horror. The Vectari students cycled through colors so quickly they looked like living disco. Balls, the Kalani were making high-pitched squeaking sounds to each other. One of the Kalani students, a small creature with golden fur, managed to make himself heard above the commotion. His voice was squeaky, but clear through the translator. Professor Chen, after consuming the reproductive material of one species, "You are now consuming what appears to be the muscle tissue of a completely different species. Are you performing some kind of ritual?" Sarah looked down at the bacon in her hand. Technically, it was muscle tissue, though she had never thought of it that way before. She took another bite while considering her response. "This is called bacon. It comes from pigs, which are animals on Earth. Humans eat meat from many different animals. This is also normal for us." The silver Zephyrian student who had spoken first raised her hand again. Her voice carried a note of amazement when she asked, "Professor Chun, in the span of just a few minutes, you have consumed the reproductive material of one species followed immediately by the flesh of another species. Is this typical feeding behavior for humans?" Sarah nodded while chewing her bacon. "Yes, this is a very normal breakfast. Most humans eat several different types of food at each meal." She finished the first strip of bacon and reached for her toast. The bread was golden brown and still warm, with butter melted into its surface. As she bit into the toast, a wave of new reactions swept through the classroom. The students began communicating with each other in their various ways, and Sarah could tell they were discussing what they had witnessed. She was starting to realize that her simple breakfast was having a much bigger impact than she had. She decided to address their curiosity directly. "I can see that you have questions about human eating habits. Would you like to discuss this while I finish my breakfast? It could actually tie into our lesson about comparative biology." The response was immediate. All 12 students indicated agreement in their various ways. The Vectari flashed bright, yellow for excitement. The Zephyrians nodded their elongated heads. The Thraxians clicked in what sounded like approval. The Kalani chittered happily. Sarah took another bite of toast and looked at her students. "What would you like to know?" The questions came rapidly. How could human digestive systems process such different materials simultaneously? How had humans evolved to consume the products of so many other species? Was this ability common among species in their home galaxy? As Sarah answered their questions and continued eating her breakfast, she began to understand that what seemed perfectly normal to her was actually quite remarkable, when viewed from the perspective of species with much more specialized diets. She was about to learn just how remarkable her alien colleagues found human adaptability, and how that discovery would change everything. The emergency council meeting, Dr. Zevik Thorne paced nervously in his office, his silver Zephyrian skin flickering with patterns of concern. As the head of biological sciences at Kepler Station Academy, he had seen many strange things during his 40 years of teaching. But the reports coming from Professor Chen's first class were unlike anything in his extensive experience. His communication device buzzed insistently on his desk, displaying urgent messages from faculty members across the academy. The first message was from Dr. Kelly-Ravash, the Vectari professor who specialized in digestive systems. Her color-coded text pulsed with alarmed oranges and reds as she described what her students had witnessed. The second came from Professor Thrix Mandak, whose compound eyes had apparently recorded every detail of the human's feeding behavior. Even Dr. Pixon Fluff Ears, the usually calm Kalani literature teacher, had sent a message filled with concerned squeaking sounds, within 30 minutes of Sarah's first class ending. Dr. Thorne had called an emergency faculty meeting. The Academy's main conference room had never hosted such an urgent gathering. 12 professors from 5 different species filled the space. Their various forms of communication creating a symphony of concern that the translation systems could barely keep. Up with Dr. Kaliravash flowed into the room, her crystalline Victari body shifting through worried color patterns. She settled into her specialized support structure and immediately began pulsing urgent messages through her transparent skin. Her colors formed words that appeared on the room's translation screens. The human's biological capabilities are beyond anything in our database. She consumed reproductive material, muscle tissue, and processed plant matter simultaneously without any apparent digestive distress. Professor Thrix Mandak clicked his mandibles rapidly as he took his place at the table. His compound eyes reflected the room's lights in thousands of tiny points as he spoke. My students recorded the entire feeding sequence. The human's digestive system appears capable of processing multiple different biological matrices at the same time. This should be physiologically impossible for most known species. Dr. Pixon Fluffiers squeaked softly from his small chair, his golden fur bristling with anxiety. My people can only digest specific nuts and berries from our home forests. Anything else makes us violently ill. How can one species safely consume the reproductive output of birds, the flesh of mammals, processed grains, and heated plant extracts without any negative effects? The room erupted in various forms of concerned communication. The Zephyrians spoke in their musical tones, analyzing the implications of such biological adaptability. The Thraxians clicked and buzzed as they calculated the evolutionary advantages such flexibility would provide. The Vectari professors cycled through alarmed color patterns while the Kelani chittered nervously among themselves. Dr. Thorne called for order by dimming the room's lights, a signal that worked for all species present. Colleagues, we need to understand what we're dealing with here. Let's review what each of our species typically consumes and then compare that to what we observe from the human. Dr. Vash pulsed blue for attention before responding. Vectari absorb energy directly from solar radiation and mineral-rich water. We do not consume solid biological matter at all. The concept of eating other life forms is completely foreign to our physiology. Professor Mandak's clicking became more measured as he explained. Thraxians consume a specially formulated liquid nutrient that contains all necessary compounds for our survival. We have been using the same formula for over 2,000 years. Our digestive systems cannot process anything else without risking system failure. Dr. Fluffier's squeaky voice carried clearly through the translator. Kalani have evolved too. Eat only 12 specific types of nuts and fruits from our homeworld. Our ancestors tried to expand our diet millennia ago, but it resulted in widespread illness. We learned to be very careful about what we consume. The Zephyrian professors nodded in unison before Dr. Thorne. We Zephyrians survive on purified energy crystals that we consume once every 10 days. Our bodies convert the crystal matrix directly into usable energy. We have never needed to consume multiple food sources. As each species described their highly specialized dietary requirements, Sarah's breakfast routine began to seem even more extraordinary. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Here was a species that could apparently consume almost anything organic and derive nutrition from it. Dr. Vash's body suddenly flashed bright red, the Victari equivalent of a dangerous realization. Colleagues, what if this adaptability extends beyond just food consumption? What if humans possess other biological capabilities that we haven't discovered yet? This question sent a wave of new concerns through the assembled faculty. Professor Mandak began clicking so rapidly that his translator had difficulty keeping up. If their digestive systems are this adaptable, what about their immune systems, their physical capabilities, their cognitive functions? Dr. Fluffiers stood up on, his small voice filled with worry. We know almost nothing about human biology except what they've told us. What if they've been hiding the true extent of their capabilities? The Zephyrian professors exchanged glances before Dr. Thorne voiced what they were all thinking. What? If we're not dealing with a simple exchange student, what if Professor Chen represents something far more significant than we realized? Dr. Kelly Ravache began pulsing urgent orange patterns. I recommend we conduct a full biological analysis of the human. We need to understand the true extent of their adaptive capabilities before we allow this exchange program to continue. The suggestion was met with immediate agreement from around the table. Professor Mandak volunteered his advanced scanning. Equipment. Dr. Fluffiears offered to coordinate with the Academy's medical staff. The Zephyrian professors agreed to handle the data analysis. But as the faculty began planning their investigation, none of them considered the most important factor. They had no idea what normal human biology actually looked like. Their understanding of Earth's species was limited to basic diplomatic briefings and cultural exchange documents. They had no baseline for comparison, no context for understanding that Sarah's breakfast was completely ordinary by human standards. Dr. Thorne stood up to address the group. We'll begin our investigation tomorrow. Until then, I suggest we monitor Professor Chen's activities carefully. If humans possess abilities beyond what we understand, we need to know about it immediately. As the faculty filed out of the conference room, each species deep in worried discussion with their own kind. None of them noticed the small recording device that had been inadvertently activated during their meeting. The device belonged to the Academy's student news network, and it had captured every word of their concerned deliberation. By evening, news of the faculty's emergency meeting had spread throughout the student body. Rumors began circulating about the new human professor and her mysterious biological capabilities. Some students whispered that she might be a scout for a more advanced human military force. Others speculated that her species was preparing for some kind of galactic expansion. Sarah Chen, meanwhile, was in her quarters preparing lesson plans for the next day, completely unaware that her simple breakfast had triggered what would soon become the most significant diplomatic crisis in galactic history. She was looking forward to tomorrow's class, hoping to build on the interesting discussion they had started about comparative biology. She had no idea that 12 professors were planning to subject her to intensive biological testing, or that student rumors were already spreading beyond the Academy to other institutions across the galaxy. The innocent act of eating scrambled eggs and bacon was about to transform from a cultural curiosity into a perceived threat that would reach the highest levels of galactic government.